And and welcome to you all, and welcome again to this Sunday morning class offered by the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, IMCW, and the Center for Mindful Living, part of IMCW, and it has kind of a life of its own as well. And we'll be sharing some of the things that are offered through IMCW and through the center at the end. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're healthy and well, safe and peaceful. We're in a very difficult time. I mean, we've been in a difficult time in lots of ways, but in terms of the pandemic for over 2 years now, getting into the third year, and then just anyone who does watch the news, the crisis in Ukraine and the threats there are very real. And, we don't know how that's going to unfold, but I would hope that we can all hold the people, particularly the people in Ukraine, the people of Ukraine in our hearts and in our practice today. It's unmuted. I hope, did I just get muted, or have I been talking to myself?
No, that was me. Sorry, I went to
Okay.
mute
All right.
everyone, and it
No problem. No problem. It would be funny if I'd said all that and then what was that? Yeah. So yeah, just holding people, the people of Ukraine and the whole region in our hearts and our practice today. And so I hope everyone here feels welcome and welcomed, whoever you are, wherever you're joining us from, however you identify in the world, that you are fully welcome here. That's certainly our intention, our deepest aspiration, that everyone feel welcomed and seen, and. So what we'll be exploring today, we'll be continuing. I talked last week about these 7 qualities known as the factors of awakening, 7 factors of awakening. It's one of the Buddhist lists. There are endless lists. But this is a very important one, but not one that everybody knows about in the way that might know about the Four Noble Truths and the Brahma Viharas or the heart practices or the Eightfold Path. And yet the Buddha said these practices, these qualities, when we cultivate them, lead to nirvana, lead to freedom, in the same way that a river leads or inclines to the ocean. And many statements about how fundamental these 7 qualities are, and how we can develop them, we can nurture them and cultivate them. And they lead to freeing our hearts, freeing our minds. I'll just name them again. Mindfulness is the first, and I'll also share them later when I talk about this. But mindfulness leading to investigation, the quality of kind of really being interested in our experience. When we're aware of it, we become more interested in it. And as we become more interested, energy, the third quality, grows. There's a kind of a sense of inspiration, of curiosity, can be creativity arising out of that. And in that energy can very much, as the mind gets focused and stiller, what can arise is joy. Joy as a kind of a real openness, a real spaciousness. Sometimes it can be expressed as rapture. Very beautiful quality of heart and mind. And then as joy settles, then what it shifts more into is tranquility and calm. a sense of ease and really a sense of very beautiful sense of calm and tranquility. And as that deepens, our focus, also our concentration gets stronger too. As the mind gets calm and there's not so many kind of things, hustle and bustle of life coming in, but the mind is more calm, then it becomes more concentrated, it becomes more focused and settled and one-pointed. And as the mind gets more focused, it becomes more balanced too. We can kind of, if anything does come up, it can be held in a more balanced and a more equanimous way. So that's going from mindfulness to investigation, to energy, to joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. These 7 qualities, and when they're developed and when they're balanced, they really set the stage, create the conditions for insight, for letting go, and for freedom, for deep freedom of the heart. So what I'm going to be talking a bit about today is the first, which is one that's most familiar to everyone, I think, which is mindfulness. The quality of mindfulness that operates as a kind of a balancing between the first 3, which are more kind of uplifting, and the second 3, which are more kind of calm and stabilizing. And mindfulness is a balance between them. So what we'll do, we'll begin with a meditation, just about 15 to 20 minutes of meditation, help us arrive and settle. And I'll bring in some of the some of the key elements of mindfulness that the Buddha taught in one of his central teachings on the foundations of mindfulness. I'll kind of include that some in the meditation. Then there'll be a talk, which will be probably 25, 30 minutes. And then we'll have some time for some sharing, and then some more time for meditation, maybe a 10, 15-minute meditation to finish. And then we'll have before that, Emily will lead us in some movement. Always lovely to get into the body, and we'll finish with some announcements, and then there's some time afterwards just to share informally if you'd like to. So again, anyone just joining us, welcome to you, and we'll sit for a while. So I invite you to just take some moments to get as comfortable as you can be and just settle into relaxed, comfortable posture. So making any adjustments that would be helpful. Sitting with your back straight, inviting the shoulders to relax. You might let your hands rest on your knees or on your thighs or in your lap. Let your chest be open so you can breathe easily. You might invite your attention to drop out of the thinking mode, out of the head, down into the body. Just feel the contact of your body with the surface beneath you. Feel the sensations of your feet touching the floor, your hands touching each other or in your lap or on your knees. Feeling the weight of your body, the gravity pulling you down towards the earth, the buttocks, the thighs, touching the cushion or chair. Letting yourself drop into being here. You might connect with your breathing. Just notice how the breath is as you bring awareness to it. You might take a few longer, deeper breaths to help you relax and settle a little bit more. So a nice deep in-breath, filling the chest, filling the lungs. Then a long, slow out-breath. You might take a few longer, deeper breaths, calming the body, calming the mind. The breath can be a powerful resource for us, both as a focus for attention, but also to help us settle and relax, or if we're feeling tense or stressed at any time, just to take a few longer, deeper breaths, just to re-arrive and settle. And in your own time, whenever you're ready, just letting the breath come back into its natural rhythm, breathing in and breathing out. Another helpful support in arriving and beginning a meditation can be to invite a smile, consciously inviting the facial muscles to come into a smile. It's helpful thinking of somebody who easily makes you feel happy or joyful, letting their image come to you. Letting the smile come down into the body, maybe into the heart area. Letting the smile be the expression or attitude with which you meet the world. You meet the world with a smile. Quality of kindness, of friendliness. Wishing everyone well. Wishing yourself well. Wishing everyone here well. Just bringing a receptive awareness to whatever is present right now. In the body, heart, emotions, in the mind, in the environment. Holding whatever is here with kindness, with care. You could take a moment or two to reflect on your intention, kind of a couple of different senses of intention. One, motivation. What brings you here today? Why is it important to practice, to maybe hear some teachings, to be together with others? Why that matters to you, what brings you here? The other sense of aspiration, of how you want to show up, qualities or attitudes, practices you'd like to cultivate. Just to give a moment to reflect on that, on your intentions, your motivations, your aspirations. Our intentions kind of guide our way. If we're not clear, well, then we won't know where we're going, or we'll end up somewhere else. So this practice of mindfulness is bringing a kind, non-judging awareness to whatever is present, whatever's here right now, to make space for it. Meet it with kindness and with acceptance. The Buddha, in what is probably his most important or central teaching on mindfulness in the discourses, among the thousands of discourses, known as the Satipatthana Sutta, kind of literally translated as something like attending with mindfulness. It's often translated as the foundations of mindfulness. And he talked about how we should practice mindfulness. He says here, monks, bhikkhus, really practitioners, in regard to the body and also to mind states and feelings, whatever we're paying attention to, whatever we're bringing mindfulness to. He says, a practitioner abides contemplating the body or contemplating mind states or whatever is being the object of mindfulness, of our awareness. The practitioner abides contemplating the body, diligent, clearly knowing, and mindful, free from desires and discontents in regard to the world. I just want to say just walk through those four elements of, what the Buddha saw as key in mindfulness. The first is the quality of diligence. Diligence. Just see how that sits with you. Just For me, it has the quality of the connotation of commitment, staying focused, keeping our eyes on the prize, as it were, remembering what's important. So cultivating, developing, nurturing this quality of diligence. It's linked to effort, balanced effort. Not too tight, not too loose. But definitely with a strong intention, an intention to be here, to be awake, aware of our experience. He says the practitioner abides diligent, clearly knowing. And this is really being aware of what we're experiencing, what's taking place. The Buddha often gave the instructions, breathing in, know that you're breathing in. Breathing out, know that you're breathing out. So really this knowing, obviously we're breathing all the time. If we're alive, we're going to be breathing. But most of the time we're not really aware of our breathing. Sometimes when we're stressed out, where the breath is really tight and short, but we're often not aware of it. So here we're bringing this conscious awareness, this knowing quality to what's present, to the body or whatever it is we're paying attention to. It's really grasping, understanding what's taking place, knowing I'm breathing, taking in the experience, knowing if it's a long breath, that this is a long breath. If the mind is busy, knowing that it's busy. If there's discomfort in the body, knowing there's discomfort. So diligent, clearly knowing. The third element is mindfulness, being mindful. So being aware of the present moment. One way of saying it is wide awake in regard to the present moment. So we're really here, we're not somewhere else. It's a detached kind of awareness in the sense that we're not swept up in what we're aware of. In the way that if we're angry, we're often caught up in it, we're not aware of it. So then we bring awareness to what we're experiencing. So another way of saying it would be a receptive awareness, receiving what's coming in from outside and from within the body and the mind, sensations, thoughts, emotions. also being called bare attention, bare attention. And we're not adding to the experience. We're not elaborating on it or adding concepts, just simply the breath, how it feels, or the sensation, tightness, squeezing, warmth, coolness. It's the simplicity of the experience. It's been called an alert but receptive, equanimous observation. So there's an element of being an observer of our own subjective experience. And the fourth of these qualities, the practitioner abides contemplating the body or whatever the object of attention is, free from desires and discontents in regard to the world. So we're cultivating an awareness that is not caught up in experience. It's free from the hindrances, free from the pulling, getting pulled back and forth, and the pull and push of experience, from the wanting things we want that we pull towards us and the things we dislike that we push away. Free from that. Not that those experiences can't come up, they do and they will. But we're cultivating a quality where we're not lost in all of that proliferation of experience, really. So just sitting, reflecting these qualities, diligent, diligent, atapi in Pali, quality of effort and intention, clearly knowing, it's called sampajana, simple knowing of our experience, and mindful, this kind, non-judging awareness of our experience. And that's sati, S-A-T-I in Pali, mindfulness. And free from desires and discontents, free from hindrances and the pull and push of experience. Niraya abhija domanassa in Pali. Desires and discontents, free from. So with any object of experience, the breath, the body, the emotions, mind states, sensations, or the world around us, phenomena, we can bring awareness to any of these experiences. Let them be the object of our awareness. And we practice in this way, diligent, clearly knowing, mindful and free from desires and discontents in regard to the world. So just sitting with whatever is present right now, with acceptance, with kindness, without judgment. Cultivating a focus for attention where that's helpful, and it often is. Just being aware of the breath or the body or sounds as an anchor for our awareness. Then when the mind goes off, we can just come back to our anchor or to our home base. Begin again in any moment. Inviting a quality of kindness so that whatever arises can be held in that space of kindness and acceptance. Nothing that comes up, nothing we experience, nothing that arises is a problem if it can be met with loving awareness, with kindness, and without judgment, with mindfulness. We can cultivate the capacity to hold whatever we're experiencing, however difficult and painful it is. With practice and with training, we can make the container of awareness and kindness large enough to hold and be with whatever's arising. We'll finish the meditation with a poem by Wendell Berry called How to Be a Poet. And it's in parenthesis, it begins to remind myself. It says, make a place to sit down, be quiet. You must depend upon affection, reading, knowledge, skill, more of each than you have, inspiration, work, growing older, patience, for patience joins time to eternity. Any readers who like your work, doubt their judgment. Breathe with unconditioned breath, the unconditioned air. Shun electric wire. Communicate slowly. Live a three-dimensional life. Stay away from screens. Stay away from anything that obscures the place it is in. There are no unsacred places. There are only sacred places and desecrated places. Accept what comes from silence. Make the best you can of it, of the little words that come out of the silence, like prayers prayed back to the one who prays. Make a poem that does not disturb the silence from which it came. Make a poem that does not disturb the silence from which it came. So take your time coming back. Welcome back and welcome anyone who joined us after we began. I chose to include the Buddha's teachings on mindfulness from his teaching on the discourse on the foundations of mindfulness, to include it in the meditation. I had the insight or the sense that it might be helpful there, rather than in a talk. It might be kind of more an academic thing, but to actually experience, at least to a little bit, what it might feel like to practice, according to the words the Buddha said about, when you meditate, do it like this. Because much of what we have as the teachings and that we share are, our 20th century version, put it in language that's, accommodates us and feels appropriate for our time. But it's very helpful, I think, to go to what the Buddha said. This is really important. For example, being diligent. I've been thinking about that a lot, recent in these times, right? Because I'm particularly right now, I have a lot on my calendar for the next 5 months or so. And I've experienced in the past, as I know probably a lot of you have as well, that when you get into a time where, there's a lot to do and seems like too much to do, then the mind can easily do a lot of proliferation about, I'm not going to be able to do it, and I'm going to disappoint people, or, various different kinds of proliferation. It normally goes down a negative kind of spiral. And I like to think we end up, in a ditch somewhere with, hungry, naked, and alone, because the mind just has no shame and will just keep on creating scenarios of negativity if we let it, And so the more we can bring that into awareness, and so this idea, that's kind of sense of diligence, for me, has that connotation of really staying focused. So when I can look at what I have to do and the time ahead, in a way that's kind of like, okay, I really need to be present. I need to pay attention, because if I don't, then things will start kind of getting very unfocused and things will fall through the cracks and all of that. So thinking about that, what does diligence mean to you? Excuse me. Is it a concept that is meaningful to you, in terms of practice or in terms of other areas of life, of really being diligent? having that quality of intention and effort, and like, I'm going to show up for this. I'm going to show up as best I can, and to do that. And the other qualities as well, clearly knowing, just really being aware of our experience. And the one I want to focus on for the next 15 or 20 minutes is the third one, which is mindfulness itself, sati, S-A-T-I, in the Pali language. The first language of the Buddha's teachings were written down in, related to Sanskrit. We're pretty familiar with mindfulness. I mean, that's probably the part of the practice that is most taught, most focused on, certainly in the Western Dharma world, and I think a lot in Asia as well, other places. And it has the general sense. I mean, it's out there in the culture, in our world, mindfulness in schools and mindfulness in prisons and healthcare settings, and mindfulness in sports, etc. And it's a very helpful quality in the ways that it has gone out into the world and is used mainly in skillful ways to help us live more wisely and more kindly in the world. I remember being at a conference or talk where John Kabat-Zinn, who's kind of the celebrated teacher of mindfulness in a secular secular world, mindfulness-based stress reduction, he was asked well, what about mindfulness, in the military? Aren't you just teaching people to be better killers, better, people to doing violence? And he said, I remember his response was a wise one. He was saying, well, as long as armies exist and we live in this world, wouldn't you prefer somebody, an 18-year-old kid who's being sent into Iraq or Afghanistan or whatever, has some training in self-awareness, and context, than, being there with an automatic weapon that and doesn't have any way to deal with their emotions, and and is subject to whatever kind of reactivity and habits, etc. And so we may or may not be satisfied with that. And there are questions arise around the way mindfulness kind of is being used that I think are important points of discussion to take up sometime, but not right now. What I want to focus on is just a couple of things about the practice of really about how radical mindfulness is, what a radical practice it is, both in terms of its actual expression and in terms of its end or its outcome and where it leads to. It's a radical practice in the sense that we're shifting into a different way of being in the world. So rather than being swept up in our unconscious habits, our reactions, our impulses, our mental narratives, caught up in our worries and our fears and our cravings and our dislikes, rather than, that being in that mode where we are a lot of our life, where we're actually, we're in, much of the time we're in a habitual mode, where we're acting out our desires and our dislikes in an unconscious way. We're doing it because we've done it this way hundreds of times before. And so it's very radical to actually, rather than say, I'm angry because you did this or you said this, and be very righteous about that, rather than being caught up in that anger, to actually just turn the spotlight inward and say, okay, I'm aware that anger is here right now. I'm aware of the tightness in my chest and the tension in my muscles and the thoughts running through my head. It's a dramatic and radical shift. And I think it's a really powerful thing that, to distinguish between being swept up in something and being aware of that, being swept up in anger versus being aware of anger. It's all the difference in the world. It's the difference between suffering and freedom. Because if we are swept up, we'll be swept along by our emotions, and often it will lead us into harm for ourselves and harm for others. And much of the suffering in the world, much of the conflict and the war in the world comes from that lack of awareness, that inability to pause and bring attention inward. What was it Montaigne said? I think that all of our inhumanity comes from it may not have been inhumanity, but similar word, comes from our inability to sit quietly in a room alone. All of the harm, all of the conflicts, all of the wars come from that inability. But he was saying this back in, I think, the 16th century, 1600s, actually, 17th century. The inability to sit quietly in a room alone. If we can't do that, if we can't open to our experience, then we will inevitably act it out on the world. James Baldwin said, I think the reason that people cling so tightly so stubbornly to their hates is they realize that if they let go of their hates, they'll have to feel their own pain. We'll have to feel our own pain. If we let go of that blaming and hating and judging, and the problem is out there, and sometimes it's blaming ourselves, that otherwise we'd have to feel our own pain. Thank you. Who's sharing that? Jeff sharing that. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Pretty much, yeah. So, thank you. So mindfulness helps us to step out of that and to open to our experience as it is. What we're doing it's finding that space between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl said, in that space lies our ability to choose, and in our ability to choose lies our growth and our freedom. If we can come into the present and open to what's here, then whatever is here, we can make a choice. Does this lead to happiness, or does it lead to suffering? And we can make a better choice, a choice that leads to greater happiness and freedom. So it's on that knife edge of awareness of the present moment that freedom lies. It hangs on this, rests on this knife edge. What we're doing when we rest, when we come back and bring awareness to our experience, is we're taking refuge in the truth. We're taking refuge in the Dharma. We're taking our stand on what is, rather than in our mental ideas and wishes and thoughts and desires, etc., about how it should be. We're saying, it's like this. This is how this moment is. Now, there's lots of different language for that. We're saying yes to what is. We're bringing a kind, receptive awareness to our experience. We sometimes talk about compassionate curiosity. It's that curiosity, that attention, that presence that we bring to our experience, that then brings me to the second element, really, of the radicalness of mindfulness. This first of these 7 qualities, these 7 factors of awareness. Mindfulness is radical and transformative in its goals and its outcomes. That bringing awareness to our experience, whatever our experience is in this moment. It could be anything. It could be our breath. It could be our body. It could be our grief. It could be the noise coming from outside. Whatever it is, paying attention in this moment in a skillful way, in a present way, leads all the way to the end of suffering. The Buddha talked about mindfulness as a direct path to the end of suffering. We don't have to go anywhere. We can begin right here, right now, with our experience as it is. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, whatever it is, just shine the spotlight of awareness on it and make space for what's here. What am I aware of now? What am I noticing? Hot, cold, squeezing, pinching, sadness, whatever it is. If I can stay with this, there's a direct path that in bringing mindfulness to our own experience, we can see how our own experience points to a larger experience that we all share. When I bring awareness to my breath and see that the breath keeps on changing, or that my feelings or emotions keep on changing, or what's happening around me in the world keeps on changing, and I see the impermanence of that, that subjective understanding leads to a larger objective understanding. And I can see that everything is impermanent. I can also see that that nothing can be held on to. We try to hold on to anything. We try and hold on to joy, and we can't hold on to it. It'll come and go. It's impermanent. As William Blake said, he who binds to himself for joy does the winged life destroy. He who kisses the joy as it flies rests in eternity's sunrise. Or whatever the last verb is, rests in eternity, sunrise. That seeing the wisdom of opening to and finding peace and happiness in the changing circumstances of our life, that's where freedom lies. If we want to hold on to something for grim death, grim life, grim whatever it is, grim death, want to hold on to something, we're not going to be successful in doing that, and we'll experience suffering. We have any expectations of being able to do it, then we'll experience suffering. It'll lead to unhappiness. It'll lead to suffering. So when we open to our experience just as it is, moment to moment, we can see into what the Buddha called the three characteristics of existence: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, that nothing can be held on to, and the selflessness of all of this, that none of it is ultimately I or mine. None of it belongs to a solid self or is a self. The self itself comes from, is a changing, impermanent, is something changing and impermanent. There's not a solid self, or maybe not to say it so categorically. Look and see if you can find something that you can call a solid self. This is me. Is it my arm? Well, if you lost your arm, you'd still have yourself. You can do a logical, analytical, assessment of any part of yourself, your thoughts, your emotions, your mind states, anything. And they come and go. Is any of it permanent? Is any of it lasting? We see into these characteristics and they're freeing. We see into, what the Buddha teaches of the dependent arising of everything. Nothing has a permanent, solid existence. It depends on other conditions. So, if we take some aspect of our experience, like, something, we've had some sad news about something. That sad news, that sadness that arises isn't solid, because if it's met in a certain way, then it arises. If it's met with resistance, then that sadness is going to be compounded. But if it's met with openness and acceptance and kindness, that sadness will be able to come and go. So it depends. It's dependent on conditions. It depends on how I meet that experience. So it's not that there's a solid experience and there's how I meet it. It's that meeting is a dependent arising. It depends. One depends on the other, and ultimately, as I said, it's said in Buddhism, it's empty. It's all empty. It's a deeper and a teaching that requires some unpacking, but ultimately nothing can be held on to. And when we see that, it's freeing. Rob Babea, a teacher I've kind of read and listened to a lot over recent years, who died in 2020. He has a book called The Seeing That Frees. And that's really what mindfulness and the other qualities that we're cultivating, they help us see with the eyes of insight, not just with our regular eyes, but see deeply. And that deep seeing leads to freedom, leads to letting go. It leads to dispassion. We're not so passionate in a negative sense, not so clinging to things. It leads to disenchantment. If you think of enchantment like as being in a trance, we let go of that kind of enchantment. We no longer believe the stories that the mind creates. And in that disenchantment and disillusion, we lose the illusions, then freedom arises. So this is the first of these 7 qualities, the quality of mindfulness that helps support the other 6 qualities that we're going to look at. I'm not sure exactly how we can do this in the weeks ahead, but explore these teachings about of awakening. But fundamental is this practice of mindfulness, of present moment awareness. And so I'd invite you to just to reflect on this this quality of mindfulness, of how we can deepen our practice, how we can train the mind in mindfulness, and coming back again to these the practice that I invited in the meditation, the bringing diligence, clearly knowing, mindful, free from desires and discontents in relation to the world. So I offer that today, and we're going to have Emily will lead us in some movement right now, and then we'll come back together for some sharing. So thank you for your kind attention, and Emily, hand it over to you.
Thank you, Hugh.
Thank you.
Let's just stand on our feet, opening up to the space around you. Keep your arms low, down by your hips. It brings an awareness of your lower back and the upper back, those interconnections. And then bring your arms out wide, lengthen your arms up, reach for the sky. Drop your shoulders down, come into cactus arms. And then exhale, drop your arms down, keeping your elbows up. Inhale, rise. Dropping down. Inhale, rise up. Drop down. Inhale, rise, and then reach up, extend up, grasp your right wrist in your left hand and lengthen out to the right. You could tilt over, lengthening that left side. Breathe into that left rib cage. Exhale, soften. And then return to center. Grasp the right wrist in your left hand and reach out to the right, left. And soften. Lengthening out. Breathing into that right rib cage. And come back to center. Float your arms down. Roll your shoulders together. Moving one direction and then the other. And then bring your arms out wide and turn your left palm over. The right palm is down. And on an inhale, switch. And switch your gaze back to the right, to the left last time, and to the right. Float your arms down, roll your shoulders independently, bringing motion. And roll them the other way. And then place your hands behind your back at the waist and tuck your tailbone in, under, not in, just to protect your lower back. Inhale, lifting your chest and head up. Exhale, draw your hands below your waist. Release back to the waist. Inhale, lift your head, chest. Exhale, lengthen your arms, draw your shoulder blades together. Gently back to the waist. Float your arms up, and for a moment, just wave through the air as if it were water. Dancing a dance that no one else will see. And then place your hands above your knees and come into a flat back, reaching out, lengthening your spine, feeling your feet and the energy that rises from your legs, and then drop your head down and your shoulders release. You don't have to go far. You could keep your hands above your knees for stability. Whatever is right. Breathing in, exhaling, softening, releasing down in any way you might wish. Energizing with a deep inhale again. Exhale with a sigh if you like. And then place your hands above your knees. Press on your feet. Roll up your spine, bringing your shoulders around your ears and softening them back down. One more time, draw your arms up, prayer position above your head. And then to heart center, thumbs at the sternum. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, as always. Beautiful practices. Thank you. So, I think I'd like to stay together in the group to do some sharing. So please, if you have any questions around anything that came up or anything you experienced or anything you'd like to share, you have two options. One is feel free to share in the chat if you prefer to do that, and we'll monitor the chat. And if anyone would like to share in person, just raise your hand, either physically or virtually. There's a little icon that has a raised hand like that down on the bottom right. So please feel free if you would like to share something, ask something. Yeah. There are two hands. Let's see. Pamela, I see, and oh, I'm the other one. Sorry, go ahead, Pamela.
Thanks, Hugh. That was just really great. And I think having the contemplation or your talk within the meditation really worked for me. I have a question that keeps popping up, and it came up again today. And while I understood, I think at some level, at least, I understand kind of what you're suggesting and talking about the value of mindfulness and not getting caught up in thought, but especially with strong feelings like anger. But my question comes from like the intersection between psychology, maybe, and meditation and being mindful. And so my question really is, I guess I think that anger has a purpose, and I understand like not acting on it without sort of a wise mind. So I see the value in not acting immediately, but I keep getting caught up in thinking, well, these feelings exist for a reason. And even though they're temporal, and there's real value in sort of sitting on it because they do dissipate, but they do come from a real place. So I'm just wondering if you have any comments about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, really important one. And I apologize if I came across as suggesting that, that emotions, even what are sometimes often called negative emotions are, somehow wrong, or we shouldn't have them or anything like that. I'm completely with you. I think emotions come, they come from evolution. They helped us come down, our ancestors to survive. They gave us, allowed them to do what they needed to survive, both in the survival mode, safety mode, and also in the connection with others mode and supporting each other mode. So for me, really the question, and I think from a Dharma perspective, mindfulness perspective, it's really about the what we do with them, when they arise. So if anger arises, if anger is met with awareness and with compassion rather than reactivity, then you can take the energy of anger, that has, as you say, a kind of information in it that's very helpful. In some way, anger is a response to feeling threatened or encroached upon, or feeling, the need to defend oneself. So, and so to acknowledge and bow to the wisdom that's coming from, the message that's coming to us, but how to meet that. I mean, and if we bring mindfulness to what the anger that is arising, then we can, as with the Viktor Frankl quote, we can choose how we respond. That doesn't imply passivity. It doesn't mean we just we don't do anything and we never respond. If we can meet our anger wholeheartedly, and accept it, acknowledge it, make space for it, then we can perhaps transmute the energy of anger into action. Could be anger for social justice, but we're not where we're in a story of, oh, these bad people, but we're feeling that energy. There's injustice here, and I want to respond to it. But if I can do that with mindfulness, I can keep the energy of, yes, this requires a firm response. Think of the civil rights movement, the American civil rights movement. There was a lot of that energy because after centuries of injustice and oppression, it's righteous to have that anger. But if that anger was just turned into violence at certain times, obviously it was, then that's going to lead to a lot of harm and a lot of suffering. But where it was met with kindness, with acceptance, and in a non-violent way, the energy of that anger could be used to bring about profound changes in the society. So that's, I think, a model, if you like, of how we can meet. It may not be, in certain situations, the language of mindfulness might not be used. It might be another kind of language of, it might be compassion, it might be love, it might be, but essentially the same thing of being willing to experience what we're feeling in a non-reactive way. And then out of that can come wise and compassionate action. Sometimes mindfulness is associated with passivity, with a non-doing of just a kind of quietness and a quiescence. And sometimes that can be the case. Sometimes that can be a wise way of dealing. But that's not the only mode. I mean, it can just as easily be a source of strong, fierce compassion is a term that you may hear. Fierce compassion, it has that kindness and the awareness, but it has the wisdom, that strength of wisdom in it as well. How's that land for you, Pamela?
Yeah, that's great. I think you have said this before. I think I needed to hear it again, and that was really clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Let's just see if there's anything. Yeah, thank you. Please feel free. It doesn't have to be a question. Just could be just something that you experienced, something that came up for you that was interesting. Anything you'd like to share? Who you think is going to win the Super Bowl or the Oscars? Yeah, Gabriella, please, and then Bob.
Good morning, Hugh. So good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Everybody else. What was interesting, what came up for me, and it was really lovely for you to go through those 4 qualities during the meditation. It was very helpful. When it came to diligence, I found that many times, the diligence I don't have a problem with. It's the over-efforting and sometimes the self or the judging or the doubt around my diligence with the practice or around my diligence with the meditation. So what I noticed over the last few months even is to kind of letting go around my judgments around how the meditation was or how long it was or whether I needed to do, or the quality of my mind during the meditation, just lots of comparing, judgment, things like that. And also the diligence of joining all these different classes and reading all these different books and going to a book club that was a Buddhism book club, like just really over efforting. Mm-hmm. And how much actual suffering that was causing me. It just was bleeding into an old habit pattern that I have of not enoughness, right? Just not enoughness. And I was like, what if I only sat for 15 minutes today? Oh my God, am I like allowed to just not work so hard for a moment? And what if I didn't go to that book club because I'm finding that I have a lot of anxiety because I'm feeling like I have to attend it and read it and study and it's the time when I need to eat and I want to relax and I don't have the bandwidth for it. And what if I let that go? And what does that say about me? And it was, I really loosened up and I'm finding that my actual practice and my actual has become more fruitful. And even, for instance, I was talking to Law last week. I'm in a Cloud Sangha with them. And I said, you know, my friend wants to bike ride on Sunday morning, and my friend wants to bike ride on Sunday morning during Hugh's class, and I can't go because I've got to go to Hugh's class, right? Like that, I can't allow myself to have joy and experience life because I have to go to this class. And I thought, well, what if I just didn't go for 1 week? Or what if I make it so that I have to leave a little early? And so anyway, so that is what comes for me around diligence and efforting. And it's a very long comment. I hope that was beneficial for somebody, but I would love if you have any feedback on that. That would be really, really lovely, and I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Gabriella. I mean, you know, just really to, you know, bow to, you know, just that the practice in seeing how much you were bringing, you know, a habit energy of life into the practice, and it's such an important observation. I'm sure you're far from the only one who brings the habit energies of life, particularly like, I should be doing better, I should be performing, I'm not doing enough. That's such a powerful and painful kind of syndrome that we can live in. Not everybody, but you know, we can have that very, very strongly. I think that was Tara's first book, Radical Acceptance, really was addressing that, you know, that sense, because she spoke so much from her own life and her own experience of how, you know, we can be holding a cudgel over ourselves, you know, of like, you know, if I don't do this, I'm going to fail and I'm going to be blah, 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 blah. And it's so painful. And yes, I just want to recognize the wisdom and the power of just letting your hands off the stick or the reins or whatever the image is, you know, and just, okay, how about if I relax? How about if I let myself have some space? And it was lovely just to hear in your voice and your affect that sense of letting go that came from that. You know, it's like, oh, it was so freeing, you know, it was so, and to honor that, you know, because yes, those voices will still tend to have, you know, they'll have their purchase, they'll still tend to be, you know, they'll be there until we've really kind of seen them clearly enough and said thank you enough to them, and let them go, and so, you know, and to honor that knowing part, that wise part of yourself says, yeah, this isn't the most helpful thing. Yeah, let me, yeah, I'll go on a bike ride today instead of going to class. So yes, I mean, just really, really thank you for sharing that. I'm sure it was very, very helpful to a lot of people. Thank you, Gabriella. Thank you. I have a Christine and a Achala. Is it Achala?
Ashalapat.
Ashalapat. Christina, I think I saw first, and I'll go to Ashalapat.
I understand what you're saying about anger, and it comes and goes, kind of like the clouds overhead. However, I get stuck when I'm around angry people or somebody who's really angry, and it comes out in words like, you should, or it's all your fault, you know, the pointy finger. And of course, they say, when you point one finger at somebody else, you're pointing 3 back at yourself. And I do the practice as best as I can, and I focus on the breathing. But sometimes I feel like if I say something, it's going to come out wrong, or it's going to be criticized. The half smile helps, that Thich Nhat Hanh talks about, because it changes. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, the main comment really is it can be hard, and just to recognize that we're living in times of deep division, and it seems, it's almost like in many ways we're living in different worlds, half the country or close to, and another half. And it's very, I think it's very painful. I'm sure many of us find it painful. And being in the midst of that and hearing things that either are unkind or inaccurate, or, it naturally can raise, reactions in us. We're wanting to, we're wanting to react, we're wanting to get our views across, and tell people, what's right, because we know what's right. But so it really is a practice that calls for a lot of awareness and a lot of kindness to just stay as much as we can with the feelings without going into the reactivity, finding that space between stimulus and response, finding that space where we're feeling like, oh, yes, I want to hit back at them. I want to hit that. I want to give them a piece of my mind. And then just saying, okay, can I stay? Can I breathe into this? Can I bring kindness to myself? Can I bring kindness to this other person? Because ultimately, we're all, we may think we're more right than other people, but, in many situations, but our delusion, we're all deluded until we're really free, and to see ourselves in others. Humility, I think, is really important to cultivate, just to recognize. And, what I do when I feel, judgmental about people, about what their behavior, about smoking cigarettes in places where people have to breathe in their, even if it's outside, but where people have to breathe in the smoke, or people's dogs, barking at all times of the day or night, or people holding political views that I might find anathema. I think to myself, well, what have I done? I smoked cigarettes for a number of years in my life. I've done things when I look back at my life, I think that were thoughtless, that were selfish, were not particularly kind. And the more I see that when people are acting in ways that cause harm, it's really part of, and you could say different things about it. In some way, they're suffering themselves, and they haven't found ways of expressing that, their suffering in ways that are helpful and beneficial to themselves and others. So even somebody whom we might see as doing, some of the most harmful things, they're another human being like me and like you, who wants to be happy. And the more I can cultivate those qualities of heart, of loving kindness and compassion, equanimity, the more I can make space for, for differences, and make space for my own reaction, and find more skillful ways and more compassionate ways of responding, rather than, going into reactivity. So I just want to acknowledge, yes, it's hard, and these practices of mindfulness and compassion and loving kindness can be hugely powerful, and they're a path of training, that they don't, it's not something we have the answer immediately. Oh, I just bring mindfulness to this. We have to train the heart, and we have to train the mind, but we can do it. As the Buddha said, we can do it. He said, if I didn't think you could do it, I wouldn't ask you to do it. If I thought it would cause you harm, I wouldn't ask you to do it, because it leads to happiness and well-being. I say, abandon the unskillful and cultivate the good. So I hope that's helpful, Christine. And I see we got 3. Let's try. I'll try and do these as agilely as possible, and not talk as much as I've been talking. Afat, please.
Hi. and it's Ashalapat, but it doesn't really matter. That's
Ashalapat. Thank you.
inimitable spirit, and I use it along with I guess it's another attachment, but it just reminds me of courage, and I don't know, anything that helps, right?
Yeah.
So where do I find was it 6? Was it I didn't, you know, I got a lot out of the meditation, and
Yeah.
I don't really hear things in words. The things that stuck were diligence, which is a big thing with me now in terms of discipline and practice, and just sheer, oh, yay. And what was really coming up for me also was just more what I'm having issue with, which was the grasping and clinging, the desire and discontent. That was the item, the attachment, the grasping, the clinging, the attachment, the defining myself or the connection to something external that's temporal. Oh, so this is, okay. I want to be finishing my thought, but I guess what came up when I was doing, I actually literally had to stop and write a poem when we were done about being connected to generations of cell phones that I'd lost, as if that defines me, and that I'm now lost because names of men in yoga classes from 3 years ago, and setting a horizon line for me that I'm somehow lost because I don't have that. So, is there a link for this?
I can give you a link, and I'm happy to. I just put together just 2 or 3 slides with these. So please, if you want to, I can send them. I wonder what the best way of doing this would be, so I don't have to send out many copies. Although I'm happy to do that as well, if anyone would like.
How about just the CML list?
Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. Thank you, Pat.
Because this was so helpful, and I don't want to get so attached in my mind when I'm meditating and listening to you that I try to hold on to a word, because that's exactly what I'm saying. But I'm literally so it's like boxes. It's the material things that I'm trying to straighten out in my life, the wreckage I've created. I can't even sleep, and I wake up and I can't get back to sleep because my brain's just like this thing, that thing. And when I'm meditating, I'm okay with letting go of that and just having clarity and allow for not controlling my profound sadness, just allowing it. But when I'm trying to sleep, no. So
Yeah.
I guess it's called bhakshas, but material things do have, I don't know. Do you have a suggestion about these material things just preventing sleep? All these thoughts?
It's a. I don't want to do a long answer just for time, and thank you. I think your sharing has been very rich in itself. What I would say is, just everything that we're doing here and in these classes to train the mind and train the heart, and it is a training. It takes practice, it takes training, it takes repetition in order to see things clearly. That when both in meditation and in daily life, as including when you wake up in the night when you're sleeping, one of the most helpful things I think you can do is just incline your mind towards well-being and happiness. So if you're waking up and you're having anxious thoughts, one thing you can do is just see if you can replace those thoughts with thoughts of kindness to yourself, or or kindness to others, compassion, loving kindness. You can also just a simple mindfulness practice of, okay, notice thinking, come back to the breath. But it can be very, very helpful to actually incline the mind in a direction that is more leads to well-being, and it can be incredibly powerful to do that. It takes practice to do it, but we're training the mind to out of the groove of judgment and blame and all of these things, self-judgment, self-criticism, and we're moving it towards compassion, kindness, loving kindness, awareness. And that's a really powerful direction to go in. And so I just encourage you to keep coming back and keep exploring and deepening the practice. And then we can talk much more about this and, any other things coming up. Thank you for sharing.
But
Sorry?
You joined us at a gathering for the holidays. Jenna had invited you through a group that sprouted out of John Kabat-Zinn's mitigation.
Oh, yeah.
So
Lovely.
I discovered you and fell in love, and I just haven't joined you in person until today.
Oh, so. Well, I'm glad you could join us. Lovely. Thank you. Welcome. And thank you for your question. Deb and Francine, if you could share, and I'll try not to take long in anything I say, but I would love to have you have the opportunity of sharing. Deb?
I just was really taken by the idea of getting swept up in anger is so different from being aware of anger. And then later, when you talked about we can't hold on to joy, but we can see the joy, kissing the joy as it flies. And it just was so beautiful. That's all I wanted to say.
Oh, thank you, Deb. Thank you. And I'd give part of the credit to William Blake, a wiser and kinder man than me. No, thank you though, Deb. Thank you. Appreciate that. And thank you. Yeah, Francine. And then we'll have a meditation and announcements to finish.
So my comment is about the anger. I found myself in a situation the other day with a friend who is unvaccinated, but I see her anyway, it's fine. And she wants to get into these discussions about it. And I try to be a good listener and, say my opinion, but keep it sort of not too hot. But at the end of the evening, I had this, she became very provocative and I couldn't control my reaction. It almost was like I feel it as violence, this level of unending anger, even though she's gotten what she wants. She's not vaccinated. She's doing her thing. I appreciate your comments about anger earlier, but I had a very unmindful reaction. I couldn't take it at a certain point, and I didn't realize it had built up. Going forward, I did text her that I apologized, and we're going to talk later, for my outbursts, because the way I handled it was not the way I would have wanted to handle it. And I will talk with this afternoon. Any ideas on how I can go forward with a person who is drenched in anger over this stuff and cannot let it go? And I've been in a way better vibration just generally recently, and it just threw me for a loop. I couldn't handle it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Francine. I'm sure others probably have had similar experiences. I think you're not alone in that. We're all different in terms of the way we express things and the way we react. Yeah, I mean, I would begin just by being as kind and as forgiving to yourself as you can. It sounds like you were under a lot of pressure, a lot of difficult situation, and you know, a question that comes up for me is the game worth the candle, as the English expression goes? You know, is the relationship worth what you are having to put into it? Is there something underneath it of sufficient value, or something in it? Sometimes if it's our own family, well, you know, we don't have too much choice. But in friendships, you know, if there is such a deep level of distance between you, might it make sense to put a little bit more space, or maybe a large space between you? You know, and to ask yourself, we won't do it now, but to ask yourself, you know, what am I getting out of this? You know, is the game worth the candle, as it were? Is the relationship worth the difficulty and the aggravation? We don't have to be friends with everybody in the world. You know, you can choose. I'm not giving advice, obviously. I'm just raising questions here. You know, what would ultimately it comes down to, I think the most helpful Dharma question is, what's most helpful? You know, what's most helpful? What leads to more happiness and well-being? Which isn't always the same as what's most comfortable. Sometimes it can be very helpful, and often to be helpful, to go into places when we're not comfortable. So I'm not talking just about comfort, but what ultimately leads to the greatest freedom. You know, and it might be of really working at talking through things with your friend. But it sounds like if somebody is so tied into a particular worldview, that's not going to be easy. You might need a lot of practice and a lot of training to do that skillfully. So, you know, there's a lot to think about there. But I think that question of what's most helpful, and whether that, you know, ultimately, if the game is worth the candle, you know, is it worth your time and energy? Is it important enough for you to do this, to put the time in? And then how would you go about doing it so you can do it skillfully? Because it sounds like, yes, reactivity will arise, and how will you work with that when it does arise? No, that's useful.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I just considered is just telling her, you know, let's just not discuss this subject. It's just too charged.
Yeah. I'm
fine with what you do, but let's just talk about other things. I don't know if she'll, you know, if having some boundary there.
Yeah. Boundaries are important. Yeah. Well, yeah, I wish you well with that, whatever you decide to do, Francine, and thank you for sharing that. And we went on a little bit long with the questions. Thank you, everyone, for sharing both in the chat and in vocally. Let's just have a couple of quiet minutes, and then we'll do some announcements and finish today. So just invite you to just open to what's present and alive for you right now. Just holding whatever's here with kindness, with care, with acceptance. However you're showing up right now. Hold it with kindness. You might finish just by taking 3 breaths, and on an in-breath, just wish yourself well. you know, whatever way you'd like to express that. Maybe a hand on the heart. So, wish of caring. May I be safe, may I be happy. And then on the out breath, a wish of well-being to all of us here, everyone here. May you be safe, may you be happy. May you live with ease, with kindness. And a final breath, kindness to yourself, and out, breathing out kindness into the world. In this difficult time we're living in, just wishing everyone well. May all beings be happy, be safe, be free from harm, be held in loving kindness. Filled with loving kindness. Finish with this poem from Gregory Orr, Untitled. This is what was bequeathed us, this earth the beloved left, and leaving left to us. No other world but this one. Willows and the river and the factory with its black smokestacks. No other shore, only this bank on which the living gather. No meaning but what we find here. No purpose but what we make. That and the beloved's clear instructions. Turn me into song, sing me awake. Thank you, everyone. And just to mention, if anyone's new, there's no charge, no cost for the course, for the class, but you're invited to, if you're able and inclined, to give dana, and dana, generosity, in English, dana in Pali is how the teachings have come down to us through 2,500 years, and we keep the practice going in this very different culture.